Okay, so as I was introduced, I am Martin Harper. I'm the Chief Executive of BirdLife International. Does anyone know who BirdLife International is? Maybe. So we are the world's largest nature conservation NGO partnership, and we have 123 partners in 119 countries around the world. Sadly, not in Azerbaijan yet, but we will one day. So I was actually, with my colleague Kathy, taking out 35 delegates from the COP to Shirvan National Park yesterday. So I don't know how long you've been at the COP, but the people doing the negotiations, they've been there for a very long time indeed, and we needed to get them out of the conference halls and out into nature. So my colleague Alden over there took us down into Shirvan National Park, and it was wonderful. It's a huge park, 50,000 hectares or so, full of goited gazelles. But the one special bird which I was delighted to see was a bird called the little bustard. And the little bustard comes to that national park in its wintering time, and there's about 30,000 or so of them who you can see at any one time. How many can you see?
Actually, there's 75% of the world population wintering in Azerbaijan.
Yeah, so 75% of the world's population of this one species, little bustard, spends its winter here in Azerbaijan. And a lot of the birds will actually be breeding in Kazakhstan, in Russia, and then they come here to winter. And the extraordinary thing about birds is that they migrate. We take it for granted. But 2,000 species of birds, about a fifth of all bird species, migrate all around the world. And they do these incredible journeys across deserts, across oceans, across mountains, and they really are an absolute wonder of the natural world. And if I show the next slide, some of these birds do extraordinary journeys. So this is the story of the bar-tailed godwit. And this has the world record for a land bird which moves from Alaska down to New Zealand in one flight, traveling about 12,000 kilometers in 11 days. It is the most astonishing journey. Actually, the world record is not a land bird, it's actually a seabird. It's the Arctic tern, which happens to be BirdLife's logo, and that travels from pole to pole all the way around 32,000 kilometers. So these are extraordinary birds, and what they can also do is they can encourage an extraordinary cultural association with birds. So this bird was tagged. What we're able to do now is put little devices onto the back of the birds to help them work out where they're going. And every year in New Zealand, there is a festival to basically welcome back the bar-tailed godwits. And all around the world, I'm sure, no doubt, in Azerbaijan, when the little bustards come back to Shirvan National Park, everyone feels, they're home, they're home. And so, if I show the next slide, essentially, like the little bustard and like the bar-tailed godwit, many of these migratory species, they follow very predictable routes, which we call flyways, so-called sort of natural superhighways. And we've been able to categorize these four great flyways of the world. And we have the Americas flyway, we have the Africa-Eurasian flyway, the Central Asian flyway, and the East Asian Australasian flyway. And the reason why BirdLife is so focused on protecting migratory birds is because, of course, you have to save the birds wherever they go, on their breeding grounds, on their wintering grounds, and of course, making sure there's safe passage all the way through. And the wonderful thing about migratory birds is that they connect people across countries and across continents. So they're a wonderful, wonderful symbol as to whether they're actually living in harmony with nature. But sadly, as you all will know, wildlife is in crisis. And just 2 weeks ago, BirdLife produced its latest assessment of extinction risk of wild birds, showing that more species are at risk of extinction than any before. From birds' point of view, about 1 in 8 species are at risk of extinction. And that was contributing to the IUCN's risk, which is showing that 46,000 species, that's 28% of all species, are at risk of extinction. And we put a spotlight on the declining migratory shorebirds, and we have upgraded 16 species to be seen to be more at risk now than they were before. And many of these populations are declining by 30%. And from my point of view, that is an illustration that we're failing in our task of living in harmony with nature. And so why does this matter? Well, this matters because birds are beautiful in their own right. The natural world, of course, we want to protect it, but of course, it absolutely underpins human prosperity. So many of the sites that these birds move through, they are incredibly important for people. So we're talking about wetlands, grasslands, forests, mudflats. All of these places which they call home are also really important for people. If you take wetlands, for example, wetlands are absolutely central to our own food and energy security. They are crucial in terms of disaster risk management. They can help prevent all of the impacts of climate change. And in the same time, they can actually help mitigate the effects of climate change. Something like 20 to 30% of all terrestrial carbon stocks are held under wetlands. So Shervan National Park, which is where yesterday, will basically hold an enormous amount of carbon under the whole of that national park. So it matters for people. And the other thing is that 1 billion people depend on wetlands for their own livelihoods. So if we want to look after people, want to look after the services that protect people, then you have to look after the places that these birds call home. But sadly, as we know, many of these birds are under real trouble and these places are threatened. They're threatened through wetland destruction, through deforestation, and also some of these migratory birds are in trouble because they're being illegally killed across the whole of the flyway. And of course, we've now put in place lots of human infrastructure, such as energy transmission lines or wind turbines in the wrong place, or indeed vast buildings with windows, and they collide into them, and they die in enormous numbers. So we have a huge challenge to try and restore and recover these incredibly important migratory birds like little bustard or bar-tailed godwit. So what are we doing about it? Well, clearly, the United Nations have set 3 really important conventions off from 1992 when the Rio Earth Summit took place, and the 3 conventions were born for climate change, biological diversity, and of course for combating desertification. And the idea that those 3 conventions were all designed to try and help us live, to deliver sustainable development, to make sure we meet the needs of the current generation without compromising those of the future. And we know that in order for us to actually deliver that ambition, then we have to try and transform our economy, to change our food, our energy, and industrial processes. And that transformation absolutely has to take place now. So, unfortunately, the mood is not great. I was in Colombia just 2 weeks ago at the biodiversity talks, and quite clearly I'm here today at the climate talks, and all the stats are heading in the wrong direction. We're not on track to try and control climate, prevent climate catastrophe, and we're absolutely not on track in terms of reversing biodiversity loss. So the talks here are crucial because we need to ensure that we actually mobilize the resources to deliver the change needed to help countries adapt to climate change and to deliver a clean energy future. And at the same time, we need to make sure that nature is at the heart of our climate response. But here's some good news. So good news is, I've got 5 minutes left. Is that what it's saying? The good news is we are coming up with some solutions which help us to actually deal with this challenge. We know there's an enormous financial gap. We've got to mobilize an additional 500 billion or so for nature and climate if we're going to have any chance of reversing these declines. So what we've done is we've forged partnerships with development banks, and this has helped us to mobilize new resources in order to protect the sites of these species and at the same time help people. So what I'm going to do in the last couple of minutes is I'm going to show you a video of what's happening in the Americas. It's the partnership we have with the Development Bank for Latin America and the Caribbean, and also our US partner, Audubon. And what you'll see in the video is how we're trying to help migratory birds recover by focusing on the sites that they call home, and at the same time mobilize new resources, hopefully to give inspiration to the rest of the world that it is possible to recover nature. And we're doing that in the Americas. We've got an Asian Development Bank partnership, and we're trying to get Development Bank partnerships in these other 2 great flyways. And we think we're developing something really special that will unite conservation around the world. And this film is going to basically show you what we're trying to achieve.
Las rutas migratorias son esenciales para la supervivencia de millones de aves, ya que les permiten acceder a recursos alimenticios y zonas de reproducción en diferentes épocas del año. La interrupción de estas rutas puede tener consecuencias devastadoras para las poblaciones de aves y los ecosistemas de los que dependen. El continente americano tiene 3 rutas migratorias: la atlántica, la central y la del Pacífico. Las aves que siguen la ruta atlántica dependen de diversos ecosistemas, como los manglares de Brasil, los humedales de la llanura del Orinoco, en Venezuela, y las selvas de la cuenca del Amazonas. La ruta migratoria de Centroamérica es una de las más importantes para las aves que viajan entre América del Norte y América del Sur. Esta región es crucial debido a su rica biodiversidad, ofreciendo hábitats clave como bosques tropicales, manglares y humedales. Sin embargo, la deforestación y la conversión de tierras para la agricultura están reduciendo estos hábitats. La ruta del Pacífico sigue la costa oeste de América, desde Alaska hasta Chile. Atraviesa varios ecosistemas críticos, como los humedales costeros y las selvas tropicales de América Central y del Sur. Estas zonas son ricas en biodiversidad y ofrecen sitios de anidación y descanso cruciales para las aves migratorias. La pérdida de biodiversidad en América Latina y el Caribe afecta directamente a las rutas migratorias, ya que reduce la disponibilidad de hábitats críticos para su supervivencia. La deforestación en la Amazonía y los humedales de la llanura del Orinoco, por ejemplo, afecta a la ruta del Atlántico. La contaminación del océano y la sobrepesca están amenazando a poblaciones de aves migratorias marinas, y en el Caribe, la destrucción de manglares y arrecifes de coral también representa un gran desafío para estas especies. Actividades como la deforestación, la conversión de tierras para la agricultura intensiva y la urbanización ponen en peligro la supervivencia de poblaciones enteras de aves. Ante esta realidad, CAF, junto a Audubon National Society y BirdLife International, han formado una alianza llamada America's Flyways Initiative, que realiza esfuerzos de conservación hemisféricos enfocados en la protección de las rutas migratorias, creación de corredores biológicos y la conservación de hábitats. Están ayudando a proteger los hábitats esenciales en estas rutas. Las aves migratorias interconectan ecosistemas estratégicos. Por eso, su protección representa un reto y una oportunidad para generar una acción efectiva y promover la integración y la vertebración de territorios. Es fundamental trabajar con los países, el sector privado, la sociedad civil, instituciones científicas y académicas, y con las comunidades locales, especialmente los colectivos más vulnerables, para generar espacios de diálogo que permitan contribuir a la puesta en valor y gestión eficiente de este patrimonio natural de la región y de toda la humanidad. CAF, Banco de Desarrollo de América Latina y el Caribe.
Oh, right, sorry. Yeah. And if you have any questions, of course, I'm very happy to answer them. I'll just be outside for a while. So anyway, thanks for coming.